Hi, I'm Jade, and I am currently mostly a trauma holder, I guess, in Collective Mind. And I'm going to try to make a life update video that we've been trying to make for a while now. A lot of you have probably noticed that we have not been on top of content lately. We haven't made a video in a while, in weeks, and we have been missing a lot of live streams and all those things. There's been a lot of stuff going on, and we've broken it down into a few main categories, and I'm gonna try to go through those. As a lot of you probably know already from other times we've mentioned it, we have a physical disability, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, and we've been having a lot of flare-ups with that, and essentially we've been trying to figure out the balance of how much we can actually do when we feel okay without having flare-ups afterwards, or minimizing how bad they'll be at least. And we have not yet figured that out. But because of some medication changes, we have times where we feel good enough to push ourselves too hard. But then if we push ourselves too hard to try to catch up on things that we're behind on, or just because it feels good to be able to do things or any of that, we will crash really hard for usually days afterward. This is mostly physical things, but can also be stress related. But physical things don't have to be intense. If we just get up too many times in a day, that seems to be enough a lot of the time. Or if we try to do a couple chores in a day, even if we take a lot of breaks and do all the other things we're supposed to do. So we're trying to figure out what that balance is. And some of you probably also know that we've had a lot of vertigo type symptoms too, and we had medication for that, but it wasn't really helping, so we don't have medication for that now. So there's very little we can do if we have those symptoms specifically, and they are very debilitating, even though it doesn't seem to lead to us passing out or anything like that, like a lot of the other POT symptoms can. It makes it so we can't even do a lot of the stuff we normally do to relax, never mind productive things. We also found out that some of the headaches that we've been having for a long time are actually migraines, and they got worse for a little bit, like a week or two straight, to the point where we talked to our doctor about it and found out they were migraines and got some meds for that, which are helping, thankfully. But that was part of what started this whole period of missing uploads and missing a lot of streams, was a week or two where we had a lot more than normal of several of our symptoms, including vertigo and migraines, and couldn't really do anything about it for a little while. The other thing that was different with the migraines during that time that made us end up actually talking to our doctor about it was normal, over-the-counter pain meds were consistently not helping anymore, and they used to help at least some of the time, especially if we caught it early enough, but it wasn't doing anything as far as we can tell to help several times in a row. That's pretty much the overview of the physical stuff. So getting into mental, emotional, we also had I would argue we've had a few like separate back-to-back depressive spells because we had a few points where it felt like we were coming out of it and then like we went into a new one essentially. We think that they have been at least partly triggered by the physical like flare-ups and things like that because it is depressing to not be able to do things, but we've also had a lot of general like stress and anxiety because it's a bad time of year for us with trauma anniversaries, and it's really stressful to not be on top of things that we care a lot about and want to be doing, but we've also had some system changes going on which have been really stressful, which is the next section that I'm getting into. The big one, we don't really know everything that's going on with it yet, which is part of why we didn't make much of an update for a while at first, was because it felt like we were still in the middle of whatever was happening with this, and we didn't know what it was going to be, so we didn't really feel like we could make the update yet, but it has stayed in that like in-between spot for weeks now, so we're just going to share some of it, and some of it we're probably not going to share the details of, and some of it we don't know yet. So Jaden, one of our major protectors who has a laundry list of roles, like I do, but more than I do. You've seen them in some videos and stuff. They have been unable to do any of their jobs other than being a trauma holder for several weeks. Over a month now, I think. They have been overworked for basically our whole life. Like, even before fusing and stuff, Michael was very overworked. And old Natalie, who was the other alter who fused into Jaden, was also overworked and had a lot of responsibility. But Michael in particular, and then Jaden after the fusions, has been deeply, deeply involved in like most areas of our systems functioning internally and externally for our whole life. And it seems like that's finally catching up with them. A lot of the rest of us had already kind of hit that wall with a lot of things of not being able to just push through stuff that we used to push ourselves through, and being too burnt out and exhausted and not being able to mask for long periods of time anymore, or like we wouldn't be able to work any kind of remotely traditional job currently, even if we weren't also physically disabled. But Jaden hadn't hit those walls yet, and it had been their job and Michael's before them to be functional under all circumstances, essentially. A big part of their job for a long time has been to be the one who confront and still do things no matter what's happening, no matter how triggered they are or how triggered someone else is, what's going on inside, what's going on externally, any of it. And we don't know if they're going to split or go dormant or fuse again, or if they just need a break, or if they can't do those jobs anymore. It's technically possible that any day now they're gonna like say that they're fine and try to go back to those jobs, but we are trying to figure out how to handle those roles differently, even if they end up being okay and they want to go back to some of them. We need to take some of that off of their plate as much as we can. But we also need to be preparing in case they can't do most or all of those jobs indefinitely. So there's, like, that's a big change already, but there's also things that are happening indirectly because of that. Because a lot of us are doing more than our normal workload, trying to cover for the things Jaden is normally doing. And then there are people in our system who, even if they aren't directly like covering for Jaden, they're covering for someone who's covering for Jaden. So like that's happening with a lot of our caretakers right now. Jaden hasn't been a caretaker, like basically at no point I can think of they've ever been a caretaker. But we have some caretakers who are also like internal protectors and other things like that. Or like especially Alina is also a gatekeeper. She's like primarily a gatekeeper, but she helps a lot with caretaking, but she hasn't been able to because she's covering way more of the gatekeeping, communication, and like internal protecting side of things. So the other caretakers who aren't covering for those things are busier anyway, even though they don't have to personally cover for Jaden on any of those jobs. But there are also things that, as far as we know, there isn't anyone else who can do those things. One of the big ones for that is internal long-distance communication in our system, which we had been planning to have Jaden make a video about that. Maybe they still will at some point. Maybe one of us will talk about it differently than Jaden would have. We'll see, but Jaden's level of communication has for a very long time been much, much higher than anyone else's, including gatekeepers and like all of that. And there are a lot of, especially like fragment trauma holders deep inside, who Jaden is the only one who had any communication with them. And that's not something that we can just like try harder and be able to do. Things like that our brain has walls up that we can't just push those down. And in a lot of cases it would probably be a bad idea, even if we were able to do that all at once. There are some things related to that too. In the fronting area of Jaden was deeply personally involved in like managing triggers in the front area, and most alters under most circumstances can't get to the front area when someone else is triggered badly enough, but Jaden usually could, because that had been part of their job for so long, including as Michael, of helping to handle triggering situations, even if it wasn't for their specific like trauma area that they would be fronting for, and helping to make sure whoever was fronting for the situation was able to function through it, and getting them out of the front if they couldn't, or getting them to be able to somehow if they couldn't. Like there was a lot that they would do to like forcefully ground people who were triggered in the front. And things like it's a long list of things that they had access to, that they like built up access to years and years ago over time, and have had the highest access since then, that we can't just assign that job to somebody else because somebody else can't do it. So those are the things that if they say in a couple days or a couple weeks or whenever that they think they're doing better now and they want to go back to any of their jobs, those are the things that we would have them continue to do. And they would probably still be involved to some extent in a lot of the other things, but not. More of it would be delegated whenever possible. The other system-related thing going on is I accidentally, technically, found an area of our inner world that we didn't know about. As far as I know, none of us knew about it. And it has been very stressful for reasons that I don't think I'm going to describe, but it's not a pleasant place. And I don't seem to have total control over whether or not I will be there. So I've been trying to figure out what's going on with that, if it's connected to anything else that's going on in our system, or if there's anything that we need to be doing about it, if it means anything that we need to look into on a deeper level, if it's uncovering something that we need to process, trying to figure all of that out. But there are also ways where a lot of these things interact with each other. So even if we're initially having a better day in some of these areas, but not in one of them, that can make some of the other areas worse too, because, like I said earlier, the physical symptoms are depressing. Not being able to do stuff even when we feel motivated and like we want to go film a video right now or whatever, if we can't physically do it, if we're too miserable or can't get out of bed or whatever, that's really depressing. But also the depressive symptoms and the anxiety symptoms and all of that makes it harder to deal with the physical symptoms. Like, it reduces our tolerance for the physical symptoms. It makes them harder to deal with. It makes it harder to do the things that help with them. And it can make it more likely to do things like not sleep as well and then have trouble getting up in the morning and then take meds late and not eat early enough, and like all of those things that have a spiraling effect for the rest of the day. Sometimes longer. But also, we can't always tell if something sounds hard to do physically or for like emotional reasons. And if it's like a depressive symptom that something sounds too hard to do, sometimes it helps to push through that. Like, it helps with the depression to push through it. But if it's physical, pushing through it is gonna cause flare-ups and could be like physically dangerous. It could be a safety risk. So not always knowing which one it is really frustrating, because the response that we're supposed to have is so different depending on which one it is. So that's the update. We are trying to figure out things we can do to minimize the problems we're having with all the various things. But beyond that, we are trying to be as flexible as we can with ourselves for filming and streaming and all of those things especially. And we're going to try to lower the bar a little bit in terms of like not feeling like we have to be in a really good mood and high energy and everything to film or stream, because it's great if we can do that sometimes, but it's also okay for our disabilities to be visible. And in a lot of cases, we would prefer to have content, even if the content isn't the absolute peak of what we're ever capable of making theoretically. Especially if having the bar set that high makes us not make anything for weeks, you know? So yeah, thank you for watching, and a special thank you to all of our new patrons, we have the link in the description as always for anybody who wants to check out the perks over there. And the schedule for uploads and everything is still the plan overall. When we are able to do that, we're going to be flexible somewhat on timing when we can, especially for live streams, in order to make them happen still, if possible, even if the original time that we planned for doesn't seem like it's going to work out. And one thing we did add to our Twitch streaming schedule that is actually more YouTube related, if you look at that, is having a stream scheduled for Tuesdays and Fridays, which is the days after videos are supposed to go up. That can be a YouTube Q&A stream instead if we missed the video upload the day before, but could also be an extra gaming stream if we didn't miss the video and feel up for it. So that's kind of like an alternate option that we still have scheduled, so people will hopefully have a general idea of when we're planning on doing that if we are up for it and don't have to reschedule or cancel. So yeah, take a look at the Twitch schedule in particular if you want to see when we are hoping to do things, and we are trying to edit that when changes happen. Otherwise, make sure to like the video if you liked it, and check to make sure you're subscribed and have the bell turned on and everything for notifications so that you don't miss videos when we do manage to upload them and when we go live especially. Also, feel free to comment if you have thoughts or questions about any of this or ideas for any future videos you want us to make. We keep track of all of those and we do read all of our comments. And I think that's everything, so thank you for your patience with us when we are having trouble staying on top of things, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!